Welcome back to Machinist Made. Today we're going to go over how to get started creating a simple sketch. We're also going to talk about how to create simple geometry. So first things first, we open Fusion up. Up here at the top, we want to make sure we are in design. Design is for creating whatever you're going to put your toolpath to, or whatever you are actually trying to generate. Everything starts in design. Make sure you're in design. Then up here you've got several different tabs to work with. Start with, you've got create, which is where you're going to create things. Fusion makes this very, very simple for novice in the industry. So under the create tab, you've got a whole host of selections, but Fusion made it quite simple and put the priority ones right up here in the top. And these are customizable. So the first one that I'm going to go over is create a sketch. Once you click on create sketch, it's going to ask you what plane would you like to work in. The back plane, if your screen looks like mine is set up for Y up. So green is Y, red is X, blue is Z. So if yours is set up like mine, your Y will be straight up. So the back plane on my view is YX. The left side is YZ, and the bottom is ZX. For your traditional mills, you're going to be working here. For your traditional turning centers, you're going to be working down here. I'm going to create a mill style part, so I'm going to work on my back plane, and you see those colors follow you again. Green is Y, red is X. And if I was to turn to the side, you don't see the Z unless you look up here in your global position. I'll swing back to the front. And one thing you may have noticed on your screen is this top bar changed. Well, it changed because we went in to create a sketch, so it's giving all the sketching tools within Fusion 360. So the first thing, again, you see this tile is called Create again. This is where we create basic geometry. When I say basic geometry, I'm talking about lines, circles, rectangles, squares, text, points, even splines, slots. Everything is within here. Modify is exactly what it sounds like. It's taking something that you have already created and you are modifying it to be something different or to change the size of it. Constraints, this is how we restrain what we want our lines to do. As you're drawing with inside of Fusion, you'll start seeing these GD&T symbols is what they are actually called. So you'll start seeing these symbols pop up as you're working through your sketch, and they relate to exactly what the symbol represents. So some popular ones most people know right off because we've all had basic geometry class is parallel and perpendicular. These are the two that you see the absolute most. One other one that I see a lot of is tangent in my drawings, and concentricity. This is a circle concentrates to itself, which means they are dead center of one another. And then you'll see symmetrical a lot. So anytime you're working for left and right hand of a part, we can use a feature called mirror. Mirror is up here in the create function. And when you create that mirrored image, everything from left then becomes the right. And then you'll see a whole bunch of symmetry emblems pop up. Now over here on the right side in what we call the sketch palette, you will see different options. Do you want to snap to the grid? Do you want to slice? Do you want to have the grid even shown? You can turn the grid completely off. Show profile, that's within your part. Show points, dimensions, constraints, all that stuff. So if you're working on a drawing and you've got a lot of constraints that are popping up, you can actually turn your constraints off to make what you're working on clearer. You can also do the same thing with your dimensions. A lot of times when I'm drawing, I'll put my dimensions in there as either a reference or a way to constrain the part. And constraints are kind of the lifeblood of how all geometry is created. So you can turn those dimensions on and off. Again, I see a lot of people, they go, oh, well, I can't see my dimensions. Well, you definitely need to look over here in your sketch palette and make sure that they're there. Down here at the bottom, this is always follows you. I forget what Fusion actually calls this. A lot of different software developers have this down at the bottom. But you've got orbit, you've got pan. Pan is just moving everything around. Zoom in and zoom out. You can click with your left mouse pointer and go in and out, or if you have a scroll wheel. Zoom window, this is where you would create a window to zoom into at. And you've got your grid snaps, and this is again, snap to grid, snap. Same thing. You can turn it on and off down here. You can change your grid settings. You can go to adaptive, which means as I zoom in and out, you see the numbers change. 10 and 5 now become 7.5, 5, 2.5. I zoom in some more. If we change that to fixed, they never change. So if you need a constant reference, let's say 1/4 of an inch. So now you've got a 1/4 of an inch reference as you're drawing. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There's an inch, inch and a quarter, 2.5, so on and so forth. I like the adaptive grid and have everything turned on as reference numbers. That's just the way I like to draw. And the last but not least is viewpoint. How do you want to see your screen? So back in the day, some people may remember AutoCAD had this feature. I say feature, but it was always on. And as you drew down here in this section, it would show you your top, right, and then it would also show your isometric view or your 3D view. For me, I tend to want to use one view as well as pan and zoom to my leisure. Now up here at the top right, you've seen me kind of play with this little cube up here several times now. The way this cube works is if you're working, it will actually disappear. It isn't disappearing right now, but I've seen this top cube right here completely be gone from the screen. But you can hover over it at any point and you'll see the home, you see rotate left and right, you see move to another view. You can left click and swing this thing however you want. So for me, working in a mill view, I have my Fusion set up where my front view is my top of my part. Now that might not be your preference, but that is mine, and you can set those preferences by going up here into preferences. Mine should be set to Y up. If you want your Z to be pointing straight up, you would go to Z up. I come from the kind of old school mentality of the old school SolidWorks. So you see that my pan, zoom, and orbit preference is SolidWorks, and all my stuff is handled on the mouse. So my scroll wheel is my orbit. My right click draws this funny little line that actually highlights stuff. Then my left and right, with this is select all. If you click and hold left, drag up into the left is select all. If you click, drag right and down, that is partially select, and it only selects what is completely within that square. I'll actually show you how that works. So let's say I've got two circles on here and I click and come this way. You'll see that it only selects the one that's completely encapsulated by the rectangle. But if I click up and get even a little bit of it, it's selecting everything, even if I just grab just a corner of it. Some other functions, you hear me typing on my little clicky mechanical keyboard here. Some of the other functions, like line, I can hit L and I can bring line up. I can click escape and it cancels whatever function that I'm on. Circle works the same way. Rectangle works the same way. So they are the Fusion, I believe. I'm not sure if these are standard functions again across all CAD programs, but I do know that those functions derive from old school AutoCAD, where you did everything on keyboard back in like 300 years ago, like 1995. Just kidding for my older crowd there. The old school AutoCAD stuff kind of followed through. It's even in Inventor. It's in Fusion 360. SolidWorks has adapted some of it, like line function in SolidWorks actually works if you set it up right. So that's just kind of some of the basic functions within Fusion 360. I'm actually going to show you some of those functions now. So again, I'm going to hit L for line, or I can come up here and click line function. Either way, you see this same thing pop up in the front right here. It's telling you, hey, this is your orbit that you've already picked, and this is your rotation right here. So now I'm going to create a very simple line. I'm going to click, drag right across my x-axis, and instead of clicking where I want to go, I can simply type in my dimension. Now you see there's two boxes here. There's one box that has 1.25 in it, and a box slightly to the right and down that's 0.0 degrees. If I hit tab, I can change that degree. Positive degrees goes counterclockwise. So let's say I want 180 degrees. Well, it just flips over to the left. Then when I click enter, I have a simple line and it holds my dimension for me. Now, if you don't want that dimension, you can click and you can delete that dimension. If you ever screw up within Fusion 360, you can hit Control and Z on your keyboard and it's an undo function. Control Y is forward, Control Z is backwards. That is a Word doc function. Again, Fusion Team seems to really like shortcut keys, and I don't have all of them memorized. I just memorized the ones that are very handy and helpful to me, and I'm not sure if you can customize those or not. So the next function I'm going to demonstrate is circle. So with circle, I can hit C, and it brings up center point circle. But let's say I don't need center point circle. So I go to create circle, and there's multiple circle functions. Let's say I want 2-point circle. Well, there's my circle. I click and notice it's pulling it from the left-hand side. Then let's say I want to make this circle 1.875. I hit enter. And I go, oh, dang, that's not 875. That's 375. You just double click 1.375. And notice my constraint stays. Again, that's how we make sure things are staying put, is we use constraints. This constraint is called constant, which means you put it there, it now stays there. That's what that little icon right there that you're seeing just right there is. You can actually click on it, it'll tell you constant constraint. Now again, like I said, if you don't want to see the dimensions, but you want to keep them, turn your dimensions on and off. Simple as that. Let's say you don't want to see the constraints, right? You don't want to see this right here. This constraint, horizontal constraint. Up here, horizontal and vertical constraints. Let's say you don't want to see those. I don't want to see those. Try looking at them. Turn them off. Now, even when you hover, they don't show up. If I turn it back on and I hover, those two constraints pop up. You know, if I don't want to see them, I simply turn them off. I like seeing a lot of that stuff, especially for bigger drawings. For smaller drawings, I could honestly care less about, but for the bigger drawings, I want to be able to see them. So let me pull up another part of mine and show you what a finished sketch may look like. Alright, so here's a finished sketch. I'm not 100% sure where this tutorial came from. I think it's one of the Fusion 360 tutorials. But you'll see this is a finished sketch. We've got a rectangle. Pretty simple. If we go back and actually edit this sketch, you can do that by right-clicking on your sketch. First of all, your sketch will probably look like this. You down-click, and then there's sketch 1, sketch 2, right-click, edit, and then you bring this up. But what you're seeing is all the dimensions and all the constraints that Fusion 360 used to bring this part together. So let's say I don't want to see the dimensions. I can turn them off. Let's say I don't want to see the constraints. I can turn them off. I can turn both of them off. I can turn the grid off. And this geometry, this very basic geometry, a bottom square, a top profile, these are drawn on two different planes. If you were curious about that, there is two different planes going on here. This part created this body. Very basic geometry. Down here on the bottom of the screen, this is what we call the timeline. So if you want to see what the part looked like originally, well, there was the first sketch, and there was an extrusion, and there was another sketch. Turn that sketch back on. Then there was another extrusion. Then there was some corner rounding that went on, some more corner rounding, and then the individual that drew this decided to use the hole wizard to create all of the holes. And then finally he mirrored the last hole. One last thing I'm going to go over is a, to me, very important feature, and that is inspect. I have used this feature more times than I care to admit. Once you click on inspect, especially if you're getting a model from some other source, if you're not the creator of the model or the creator of the product, then you're going to use this feature a lot, because you need to know, well, how deep is this? Well, you don't know, right? You didn't have the sketch, you don't have the timeline. Somebody sent you this from Pro E, or somebody sent you this from AutoCAD, and the only thing that you got was a DXF, and you can't do anything with it, right? You need to know how to inspect a part to get features off of that part. So we're looking at this, we're going, well, how deep is it from here to here? Well, we can click on both these surfaces, and it simply tells us the result distance is 1 inch. The angle is 0 degrees because there was no angle pitch. If I click off, just by clicking in the white area anywhere on the screen that's not the part, I can get dimensions. The radius is 1/4 inch, diameter is 1/2 inch. I click off. I go, well, how big is this radius? Well, not radius. Boy, I'm doing good today. I can click on this little line right here, and it tells me that length is 35 thousandths. And if you're a machinist and you know that that length is 35 thousandths, you automatically know it's 25 thousandths chamfer, 45 degrees math. Let's say you're looking at this going, well, I don't know how deep this counterbore is. We can again click on the two surfaces, and it tells us it's 550 thousandths. Let's say I'm looking at this radius, and I go, I need to know how big that radius is. You can click on the wall, and it'll tell you the radius. Or you can click on the bottom floor, and it'll tell you that radius. Let's say you need to know how big the actual part is. We go to our top view, and so again, this is one function at a time. 6.95, click off, 5.45. So this is going to be made out of 7 by 4.5 inch material, or 7 by 5, because that's a little bit more common. So it tells us those very plainly. We can even ask for a secondary unit. Let's say we want millimeters. Well, now it's going to give you the distance with inch and millimeters. Most people don't even know this exists. Let's say, oh, I want a little more precision. I want the 4th place decimal. Well, in this case, it's not going to give us anything because, well, there's nothing there to give. It's 6.9500. And it's just going to go in default to the quickest dimension that it can. I need to know how tall the part is. Well, again, you click on the top, you click on the bottom. 1.5 or 38.1 millimeters. So this was just a simple tutorial. Again, this is going to be a series of videos walking through a lot of these different tabs. Like I said, what I touched on today was creating basic geometry, a little bit of modifying the timeline, how to use the sketch palette stuff. Talked about constraints a little bit more. If there's something very explicitly you would like for me to cover, leave it down in the comment section down below. I'd be happy to do it. And I hope you like and subscribe, and make sure you keep coming back for great content. Like always, have a fantastic day.